Hi, I am Alina Saad, the social media coordinator at Edgeweaver, and today I am lucky enough to have an interview with Rob D. Smith, who wrote The Many Mouths of the Endless Night in this new book that you guys should go check out, The Tales from the Cursed Edge, which is one of the featured books, I believe, at Edgeweaver currently. Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Melina.
Um, I guess tell us about yourself. How long you've been writing for? What genres that you like?
I've been writing for quite a long time. Recently, in the last 5, 6 years, I've had a lot of success. I write multi-genre. I write horror. I write sci-fi, weird fiction. But most of my success has come in the crime fiction world. Recently, I just had a debut novel coming out last year called Good Looking Ugly that is up for an Anthony Award this year. And then I have a short story called Box Full of Soul that was got picked up for the best mystery and suspense of 2025, edited by Steph Chaw and Don Winslow. So that's coming up this year too. So two big success stories in that thing right there. And but this is always been a lifelong reader of fantasy, sci-fi. Started off reading in that genre, and this is my first fantasy story ever published with my co-writer W. Wurtenberger.
Congratulations with that, by the way. That's a very big accomplishment, especially for, you know, especially as an author with such a saturated market in this genre. What specifically drew you to writing about the swords and sorcery genre?
Well, as when I was younger, it was mostly the I guess the gateway drug for most people in the sword and sorcery is Robert E. Howard's Conan, and I picked that up mostly from like paperbacks that were written by not by Robert E. Howard, but by I think L. Sprague, the Camp, and then there were some other ones. There's a local, Kentucky writer named Andrew Offit who wrote some too, but they were like off. They weren't necessarily dealing with weird tales or with Robert E. Howard's books. I mean, it wasn't Robert E. Howard writing them. So I saw those, and then the Frank Frazetta did a lot of the artwork for the covers and stuff like that. So those always kind of got you going. And then when they had the movie that came out with Arnold Schwarzenegger in 1982, that was another to see it come on screen was just very interesting. And there was a lot of, I guess, there was a lot of sword and sorcery books and magazines and TV shows and animation going on at that time. So it was easy for a young person to fall in love with that and the fantasy worlds of Tolkien and the King Arthur fantasies, things like that. It was just a natural progression as when you're reading in school and reading a lot of educational reading material versus fantasy and adventure fiction.
I completely get that. And I can see how that sort of inspired the writing in this book. And I'm glad you were able to take out that childhood curiosity and get it published. Um, what was the inspiration behind your story in Tales from the Cursed Edge?
Me and my friend Bill, who co-wrote this with me, we wrote a screenplay together, and I think it's where we started out trying to be screenwriters a long time ago. Before we even met, we were trying to write on different paths, and and like many of young men of our age, Quentin Tarantino's and Robert Rodriguez, a lot of those people were influential to thinking we could be screenwriters, and so we kind of thought maybe we could write. Since we wrote that together, we try writing a fantasy story together. He writes a fantasy series called Cole, and it's Cole the Saxon, and so he's very into the classic sword and sorcerer, and I've never written anything in the genre, even though I've read a lot. And I thought we should write something together, and there was a call for something. There was actually a call for a co-written story, and so it was called Two Swords or something. It was more it had a little more horror to it than it did heroic fiction. So I thought we could write something like that together, and we gave it a try, and it was it was successful. But they did not get enough submissions for the anthology, so they canceled the anthology. And thankfully, Edgeweaver had a place for us here because we really liked the story a lot.
Um, yeah, I mean, I'm glad you and your co-author managed to get published into Tales from the Cursed Edge. Um, and I feel like this story seems very cinematic, almost like film cinematic. And how did you and your co-author work during this writing in order to make everything cohesive?
Co-writing is not easy. Me and Bill have a little bit different sensibilities on things. We do agree on like dialogue, and which is kind of my dialogue's been described as banter before, like kind of quick-witted back and forth, and Bill kind of does do that as well. But for me to do that in a fantasy setting was a little more difficult, and then he has a little more experience with the um, idioms and everything that they, than I do, especially writing it. And he's written several fantasy stories, so I was just trying to balance that, so it doesn't feel modern, but it does feel cinematic, like you said. I think we captured that. Bill's very good on the physical descriptions and the historical accuracy. Well, as much as you can in a fantasy story, but he keeps it kind of grounded, and I kind of deal more with emotional stuff, and try to emphasize that. So I think we balanced each other out pretty well in this book, in this story.
So you guys essentially like complemented each other in a way where he took more of the historical aspect and you took the emotional aspect and you tied it together into this.
Yeah, and then we would we would write like a scene, and then we would send it to each other, and then they would kind of revise it or give suggestions on revising it, and then we'd go into the next scene, kind of back and forth a little bit, and then when we had the full manuscript, we went back and tried to smooth out areas where kind of seemed like they were not one person, and then when we got to accepted to the edge, the Cursed Edge, we had to do some more edits to to help I guess give us more resonance to the end of the main character's journey. And I really liked the editing process with Marie and the rest of the team. It was really I thought it was very well done, um, and made it for a better story.
I agree, honestly. And I feel like you guys worked very well in not just creating the story and how it flows, but also the hero, anti hero. And I'm actually curious, what do you think makes a hero or anti hero or villain compelling in a story like this?
It's I was thinking about I'm a big fan of anti-heroes, um, but also, and when I was, I guess it comes with age, but as I was younger, it was like, I wanted the big strapping barbarian with a sword that can't be beaten, and can take on any comer, any dragon, any challenge, anything. But now I feel like I think when I was reading Joe Abercrombie writes this grimdark series, The Blade itself, First Law trilogy, and his warriors, his characters, whether it be politicians or royalty or anything, they have a little, and it probably comes from I don't read enough George R. R. Martin, so I can tell, but they have deeper emotions, they have deeper fears, and they do have fears, and with the fear, they still get something done. So their knees are knocking, their grip's not as firm on the sword or um, on the pen if they're writing a script or something. So to me, they do the job, they do the task at hand, even though they have a fear inside them, or they're afraid of failing or afraid of success. So it's that flaws is what make the great hero to me. The flaws that get in their way, or the obstacles of getting to their success. I find that more compelling nowadays than I do of the ultimate hero that cannot be beaten.
Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just the hero that I liked about the story, but the urchin is a very standout villain. How did you or your co-author come up with that?
Well, one thing I like, I was trying to think of something that would bring fear to a battle hardened man, men who have fought together back to back in skirmishes that would, people getting their arms lopped off and things, just horrendous battles. What would scare somebody like that? And a lot of men fear children. they're scared of kids, and it's they're nervous around them. They don't know how to act around them. Sometimes they don't know how to handle them. And then I thought, well, let's just make it an unholy kid, like this urchin. And so there's just something evil about him that and the rats. Rats are those. It's just hanging. The friends with rats is not a good thing to be with anybody. Vermin are always seen as just kind of repellent. Even though I have friends that have pets, they're rats, and they're very smart creatures. But most people have a very healthy fear of rats and urchins, and so, well, at least men do. I know most of the grown men I knew have would rather not spend time with children if they can help it. So I just thought that would be kind of something small that doesn't look like it should be a threat, and it is really unnerves these three warriors.
Definitely unnerved me. And the whole city of how would you pronounce it?
Ullshak.
Ullshak.
Yeah.
Is that inspired by any real place? Or
I did let Bill did more of the coming up of the city. I wanted a port city. I wanted someplace that was close to a bay or a river or something. Close to the ocean. And Bill kind of did it based off a Babylonian kind of type city, or so that was he was instrumental in coming up with the kind of port city that I liked. Yeah.
And kind of going back to how cinematic the story can feel. How did you and your co-author handle the pacing of it, especially when it's a very vivid and action-heavy story, and you didn't have too many pages to work with, considering it's a short story?
Yeah, I most of the stories I've have to write nowadays are 5,000 or less, and so that's tighter to write a story. So I got a little bit more room in this one to write, so that was kind of it was nice. But you have to in the pacing. That's one thing with I lean on Bill because he does a lot of action scenes with his sword and sorcery stories, and most of my action is some mostly gunfights or some kind of horrific weird fiction stuff. But one thing you do is you can't be all one note either. You can't have. I like to show a range of emotions like humor. I like to have the fighting, the bickering. I like to have not just physical fighting, but could be arguments or information being passed along. I like to kind of spread out a little bit so you don't have just like one drone kind of emotion that goes through something. So that pacing is kind of like that. You want to build it up a little bit so they can, before you drop it again, have them feel something. So it's all about getting the reader to feel something. So if I got the pacing right, and I think we did in this one, building up to the end, I do believe we delivered with our pacing. We didn't go too fast. We gave the right amount of information. All the physical action was timed well. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of the pacing of this short story.
I think you should be. I think this is very good pacing. Um, and I'm actually kind of curious of how you format the story on, because this isn't like a school essay where you write like an intro, a body. Kind of, I guess, put us in your shoes. How did the emotional resonance of Kayson's past, did you go in already knowing that you wanted to put that in there, or did that sort of come in while you were writing the story?
That was not original there. There was more, it's more straight. It was more straightforward at first, like kind of just it was going to be more of the evil that kind of spread through the urchin and the rats kind of was going to be the main villain kind of antagonist in the story. But then I kind of saw that I could pull more from the readers if I made it more personal with Kayson, and so using his sister, and tying that in together with his past, and then the memories and emotions that came back from his own past, and how he handles it nowadays is kind of, I don't know, it's almost a psychological warfare on him during the thing. He's unsure of himself. He's not, am I seeing my sister? Am I seeing the urchin? I'm reminded of everything. These sensory details are coming back to him from the past, and it's really messing with his world. Hard to be a warrior, how to be in charge and of your emotions and your physical well-being if you don't know what's going on and you're not sure of yourself. So, and everything starts to unravel for everybody, and and then yeah. So that was definitely not the urchin was not as personal to Kayson until we got him done with the story. And it's the pacing also comes. We don't talk about structure, but there is a beginning, a middle, and end. That rising climate, conflict that comes down to the climax. So there is, you don't think about it when you're doing the revisions. That's when a lot of it comes into place. I just do like to have a beginning, middle, and end. Sometimes it's hard to come into a short story to finish it and have a solid ending, but definitely worth it to do it, because every reader can get, they get so much out of this story versus something at the end is like, okay, and then this is a sequel to something that comes later, and I'd like to have it finished off at the end if I can.
I think he did a very good job making Kayson feel very relatable almost in that sense when you're incorporating his emotional resonance in his past. So I'd like to give you a good job on that. Kind of a lighthearted question. If this short story was adapted to a film, what do you think would play your characters?
Well, I asked, my co-writer too, and there's I'm gonna see my back on my wall. I'm kind of a nerd. I've got a bunch of, there's comic book, there's Ultraman, there's all kinds of Sigourney Weaver from Alien. So I like all these things, but actually one of the, I don't know if my co-writer knows this, but he once he hears this, he'll realize it is. But there was there's these characters called the Three Warriors, or the Warriors 3 from it's Marvel Comics Thor. It's a Thor comic, and there's these three warriors, and there's it's Fandral, Hogan, and Vostok. And Vostok's the big heavy one, and then he's based off Falstaff's kind of the play, the big kind of heavy set guy who's kind of a lighthearted and a jokester. And then Hogan was based off Charles Bronson, which is this is because these were made back in 1965. So Charles Bronson was a grim, Hogan was a grim one, and then Fandral was the swashbuckler, like he was Errol Flynn. So the old Errol Flynn swashbuckling sort. So my choices for Kayson, I would go with Ben Foster. I don't know if you know the actor Ben Foster. He's got a new movie coming out right now called Sharp Ends on Apple TV. But he played Angel in, I think, the first X-Men. But he also did. He's been in a lot of things. He played the Renfield character in 30 Days and Nights, a vampire movie. Been a lot of he does usually like character roles, but he's a great actor. I think he would be good. He could carry that off. And he's got a good mustache, so sometimes it looks good. Makari, the other one, who kind of is or Hogan kind of character, the grimmer character. He's my co-writer said Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who plays in The Walking Dead. He likes that character. I kind of liked. There's a actor from the Warrior TV series. It's set in San Francisco, but it's a Chinese immigrant comes, and his name is the actor's name is Andrew Koji, and he plays a warrior. Basically, comes to town and kind of does some really good action segments. I think good actor. And then Delirious, the big guy, who would be our Falstaff kind of character. There's a Icelandic actor named Olafur Dari Olafsson, and I first saw him in a movie called A Walk Among the Tombstones, and I knew there was something different about him. He's heavy, kind of a heavy set guy, had a lot of presence, interesting voice, interesting cadence to his language, but he was also probably, I think most people might know him from the Last Witch Hunter. He played Belial, the bad one of the bad wizards or witches or whatever, the warlocks in there, and so So yeah, he'd be the one who I would think. Yeah, I think he'd be a good character.
I'm glad you thought about this.
I
You had
did.
answers right
Oh yeah, I was
away.
ready.
Um, since you enjoy based on your wall and all of the actors that you mentioned and all the shows you've watched, do you have a favorite fantasy story?
You know, it was kind of it's hard to always choose one of anything your favorite.
Right.
When I go with story, I think of short story versus a novel, but one that stuck with me forever is Beowulf, and it's a poem. You know, it's the Viking saga of Beowulf, and he fights Grendel. There's a King Rolf, and there's a dragon in it. But it's really the Grendel story with Grendel and then his Grendel's mother. Really enjoy that noble tale of that Viking warrior. Yeah, that one has always stuck with me. There's plenty of other stories that I could probably bring up, but if I had to go with that, say Beowulf, probably the one that sticks with me the most.
And I'm we're kind of straying away from the story itself and
Yeah.
more so you as a writer. Do you happen to listen to music while you're writing? And do you have like a specific soundtrack for your story?
I cannot write to music. I can't write to even like soundtrack wordless music. Uh, I do listen to music that influences the writing later on, like in the car or if I'm walking or doing something like that. It helps me think. But as I'm actually doing the physical act of writing, no music, really no sound if I can help it. I used to try to write in coffee shops when I was younger, but I can't even take that noise anymore. So now it's just straight against the wall writing. I can't take any music, but I do like Ludwig Göransson, who does a lot of the soundtracks he did the Mandalorian soundtrack, he did Creed soundtrack, Cliff Martinez. These are guys who do soundtracks for movies. But if I was, I like a band called Murder by Death that I think is they're more of a kind of a folk. The name sounds like a death metal band, but they're uh, uh, they actually have it's a husband and wife team. That's actually their last tour is coming up. I'm going to go to the last show, the last time, and be here in town. So, but at they have a cello she plays cello, and he has a very bass voice, and really good band. I really like them a lot. So they would probably them and those Cliff Martinez and Ludwig Göransson, the soundtracks. Yeah, those are the ones I really listen to when I'm trying to get going.
And since you like to listen to these songs that might inspire your writing and inspire the characters, if your main character had a theme song, what would it be?
Well, I did do my research. So this one would be there's a couple songs. Murder by Death. Their lyrics are really good. They're very dark. More, I almost feel like a Western kind of thing, Western Gothic or Southern Gothic. But they made a. I would like to have them make original song for the story. There's a writer named Jeff Vandermeer who wrote one of my favorite books called Finch, and I don't know how they got around to it, but many years ago when this book came out, Murder by Death actually did a soundtrack for that novel, and I've got it. It's 4 songs. There's no words, but it's instrumental and it's really cool. So I was hoping I could get, if I ever get famous enough, I would get him to do the Murder by Death, the original song. But if I couldn't do the original song, it'd either be King of the Gutters, Prince of the Dogs, or That Crown Don't Make You a Prince. Those would be one of the 2 songs that would have the theme song for Kayson if he was
Again, prepared for that question.
Oh, yeah.
My final question to you is, what would you want readers to take away from your story?
My most important thing is is to elicit emotion from a reader, a reaction that it's not. I don't want somebody to go, "Oh, this is okay. This is a fine story." I want somebody to hate my story or love my story. I don't want any in between. I want the visceral reaction from. So I really want to make them laugh, and I don't want to break their heart. I don't want them to feel just one emotion of dread, or one emotion of joy, or I want them to feel, if I can, in this short story, which is very hard to do, give them a range of emotions, and then hopefully, if I do that, then the story will linger with them, and they'll think about it, not just after one read.
Thank you so much. Before that, though, is there anything that I forgot to mention, forgot to ask, or something that you just want to briefly touch on before the end of this interview?
No, I'm very happy with Edgeweaver's, like I said, professionalism and communication, and this has been a very great working relationship. I appreciate it so much. I wish everybody was like you all. It would be really nice if I got this, and then and everything. You all definitely go above and beyond. I appreciate it.
We appreciate you. Thank you so much for getting on for this interview.
That's
Marie, I
great.
think that's it.
Thanks, Melina.
Of course, thank you.